What's your stance on the Second Amendment, and how do you think Texas can tackle the epidemic of mass shootings and gun violence we see happening across the nation, especially in terms of minority people who are particularly affected by this?
Yeah, I strongly support and want to protect the Second Amendment. And I also think it's a great opportunity for Texas to lead. Tell me a state that has a prouder, longer, richer heritage of responsible gun ownership for hunting, for self-protection, for collection, for sport, for what have you. By and large, we do it responsibly. What better state then to lead the national conversation on how we protect more lives in our state and the other states of the Union? We lose 30,000 of our fellow Americans to gun violence every year. No other developed country comes even close, so we can either reach the conclusion that there is something wrong with us, inherently bad, maybe even evil, and we should just accept this as a force of nature, or we understand that there is a human solution to a human-caused problem. One step where I find a lot of common ground amongst gun owners and non-gun owners, Republicans and Democrats alike, is universal background checks. In those states that have adopted them, we've seen a near 50% reduction in significant gun violence. Fewer police officers and sheriff's deputies being shot by those they're sworn to serve and protect. Fewer girlfriends and boyfriends being killed by a loved one. Let's at least take that first step and make sure that we protect more lives within our lives. Then there are other steps that we can take going forward when we listen to one another. And that's what we're doing in this campaign, because we have not accepted a single dime from the NRA or any other political action committee or special interest. When we listen to each other, instead of the special interests, we can lead on the issues that are most important to Texas and the country. Thank you for your question.
This is Professor Summer Harlow with a question about the media.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering, given the anti-media, anti-free press rhetoric that is so prevalent right now, what would you, as U.S. Senator, do to ensure the press is protected, journalists are protected, and that they can continue to serve as watchdogs for democracy?
Yeah, this idea fronted by the president that somehow the press are the enemy of the people, reinforced by him tweeting out images of a reporter being hit by a train, body slammed in a wrestling ring, is incitement to violence. I don't know any other way to call it. That undermines an essential pillar of the American democracy. 242 years in to this audacious experiment that is the exception, not the rule in world history, that we can freely choose those who represent us and guide the course and direction that this country will take. If we don't have a free press, if we cannot make informed decisions at the ballot box, if you can't hold people like me accountable and make sure that we're held honest to the promises that we made, to the job that we're performing in these positions of public trust, we'll lose the very essence of our democracy. Nothing guarantees us a 243rd or a 244th year unless all of us stand up for the institutions that make us so strong in the first place. So I think we need to vigorously defend the freedom of the press. We need to call out violations, not just in this country, in countries like Mexico, one of the most dangerous places to be a journalist, the killing of Khashoggi by the Saudi Arabian government. There has to be consequence, there has to be accountability, there has to be justice. This is our chance to lead on one of the most important issues to our democracy and to freedom around the world.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.